The hall was silent, filled only with the faint rustle of uniforms and the quiet hum of anticipation. President Donald Trump had arranged a private evening with veterans from across the branches of the U.S. military. There were no reporters, no cameras, just a small circle of chairs and a single American flag standing proudly behind them. Trump entered slowly, greeting each veteran with a nod. "Tonight isn't about politics," he said softly. "It's about listening." Among the group sat men and women of all ages, some young, others marked by time, but all carried the weight of stories that shaped their lives. One woman stood out, Nora Whitfield, a 60-year-old Navy veteran with silver hair and a calm, dignified strength. She had served for 3 decades before retiring to care for her disabled husband. Trump noticed her immediately. "You look like someone who's weathered many storms," he said with a respectful smile. Nora's lips curved slightly. "Storms teach you who you really are, Mr. President." Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the ice. This wasn't going to be a formal meeting. It was a gathering of Americans who understood sacrifice firsthand. As they shared coffee and sandwiches, Trump invited each veteran to speak. Some told stories of courage, others of loss, but every word was steeped in pride. When it came time for Nora to speak, she hesitated. "I don't know if my story matters," she said softly. Trump leaned forward. "Every story matters." The room grew still. Nora took a deep breath. "Then I'll tell you about the boy in uniform who never came home." The veterans exchanged knowing glances, and Trump simply listened. None of them knew that what she was about to say would one day shape a speech remembered around the world. "It was 1987, she began. "I was stationed aboard the USS Independence. I was 22, eager, determined, ready to prove myself." She smiled faintly. "There was a young radio operator named Daniel Brooks, just 19, from Kansas. He was quiet, always sketching on scraps of paper. He said it helped him forget how much he missed home." Trump listened closely, his expression softening. "One night we were caught in a violent storm at sea. It wasn't combat, just nature reminding us who's in charge. Daniel was ordered to secure communications equipment. Before he left, he handed me a folded note and said, 'If I don't make it, read this when the sea calms.' I laughed, told him not to be dramatic." Her voice faltered. "We lost him that night." The room fell silent. Only the hum of the vents filled the space. "When I opened the note," she continued, "it wasn't a goodbye, it was a drawing. A little boy standing before an American flag with the words, 'For those who dream of tomorrow.'" Trump exhaled slowly. "That's powerful. It stayed with me," Nora said quietly, because Daniel wasn't thinking of himself. He was thinking of the country, of a future he'd never see. "I've carried that note for 35 years. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. Trump looked at it, realizing it wasn't just a story. It was a lifetime captured in a piece of paper. The silence that followed felt sacred. Finally, Trump spoke. "I've met many soldiers, but few stories have touched me like that." Nora smiled faintly. "It's just one of thousands, sir. Every veteran here carries a memory they never asked for." A younger veteran, Corporal James Rivera, added, "She's right. The hardest part isn't what happens overseas. It's coming home and realizing the world kept moving." Sergeant Helen Moore nodded. "We don't want pity. We just want people to remember that freedom isn't free. It's earned every single day." Nora turned to Trump. "That's what Daniel believed, too. He used to say service doesn't end with a uniform, it begins with the heart." Trump nodded slowly. "You're all heroes. Tell me, what can I do better for people like you?" Nora paused before replying. "Listen more. Speak less. Remind the country that the flag still flies because of those who wore it into battle." Her words struck deep. Trump leaned back, reflective. He wasn't there as a politician anymore, but as an American listening to those who had given everything. That night at the White House, Trump couldn't sleep. Nora's words echoed in his mind. Remind the country why the flag still flies. He sat at his desk, grabbed a notepad, and began writing. His upcoming Veterans Day speech had been planned around policy and budgets, but now none of that felt right. He wrote, "It's not the speeches that make a nation strong, it's the stories of those who've kept it standing." He thought of Nora and Daniel, the young sailor who had chosen hope over fear. Melania entered quietly. "You're still awake?" she asked. Trump nodded. "I met a woman tonight who changed how I see everything." Melania smiled gently. "You've always honored the military. What was different this time?" She reminded me that bravery isn't just about medals. It's about love. I want people to feel that again. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then speak from that place." Trump looked up, determination in his eyes. "This next speech won't just be about veterans, it'll be for them." Outside, the flag atop the White House fluttered softly in the wind, a quiet salute to those who'd kept it flying. 3 days later, Trump returned to the same hall where he had met the veterans, this time alone. The group looked surprised. "Mr. President, you came back?" Nora asked. "I needed to," he replied. "I wasn't done listening." They gathered again, this time around a small wooden table. Trump poured the coffee himself, insisting they sit as equals. "You're not what I expected," Nora said with a smile. Trump chuckled. "Neither are you, Nora." He pulled out a sheet of paper. "I've been working on my Veterans Day speech, but I want it to mean something. I need your stories to guide it." For hours they talked, about loss, love, and the will to keep moving forward. For many, it was the first time they'd spoken so openly. When Nora spoke again, she shared something new. "After Daniel died, I wrote to his parents. They never replied. But a year later, I received a letter from his younger sister. She told me Daniel's dream was to become a teacher after his service." Trump paused, deeply moved. Even in sacrifice, he was thinking about building the future. Nora nodded. "Exactly. That's the spirit this country must never forget." Trump tightened his grip on his notes. He realized he wasn't just preparing a speech. He was carrying their voices to the world. As his motorcade pulled away from the hall that evening, Trump turned to his aide. "Find me Daniel Brooks's family." Within hours, the White House team located them, an elderly couple in Topeka, Kansas. Trump personally wrote a letter inviting them to Washington for Veterans Day. When Nora heard the news, she was stunned. "You're bringing his parents here?" Trump smiled. "They deserve to know their son's story will be told." Her eyes welled up. "You don't understand what that means." "I think I do," Trump replied softly. 3 days later, Henry and Martha Brooks arrived quietly at the White House. Trump greeted them personally, shaking Henry's hand. "Your son's courage still echoes through the people he inspired," he said. Martha held a framed version of Daniel's old drawing, "For those who dream of tomorrow." "Mrs. Brooks," Trump said gently, "your son's words will be part of my next speech." Tears filled her eyes. "He always believed tomorrow could be better," she whispered. Nora watched from the side, her heart full. For the first time in years, Daniel's memory wasn't just remembered, it was honored. The next morning, Trump gathered the veterans once more in the Roosevelt Room. The atmosphere was lighter, but the emotion remained. "Daniel's parents will attend the ceremony," Trump announced. "And I want all of you there." Nora looked surprised. "All of us?" "Yes," Trump said firmly. "Every one of you has a story that deserves to be heard. America needs to see the people who keep its heart beating." The veterans exchanged looks, some emotional, some proud, knowing that at last their stories would be carried into the light. James Rivera spoke softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Sir, it's been years since I've stood in a crowd without my brothers beside me," he said. "But if this is for them, I'll be there." Helen Moore nodded in agreement. "We've been unseen long enough. It's time the country truly understands what service means." Trump smiled, his tone warm but resolute. "That's the spirit. This year, I'm not giving a speech about veterans, I'm giving it with them." The room filled with quiet applause. As the meeting ended, the veterans began to leave, but Nora stayed behind. "Mr. President," she said softly, "thank you for seeing us. Not as headlines, but as human beings." Trump nodded humbly. "You've given me more than I could ever give back." When the room emptied, he looked at the chairs that moments ago had held decades of service, pain, and courage. He knew that this Veterans Day would be unlike any other. It wouldn't be about politics. It would be about truth. That night, Trump sat alone in the Oval Office. The shadows from the White House windows stretched across the floor as he reread his original Veterans Day speech, full of policy notes, statistics, and numbers. He tore the pages in half. "Too empty," he murmured. He began again. This time, he wrote from the heart, about Nora, Daniel, James, and Helen, about sacrifice that cameras could never capture. Melania entered quietly, setting a cup of tea beside him. "Still writing?" she asked gently. Trump looked up and smiled faintly. "This one has to matter." "What's different?" she asked. "I'm not just speaking for them," he said. "I'm speaking because of them." Melania smiled knowingly. "Then they'll feel it." As dawn broke, Trump read the final lines aloud. "It's not the sound of applause that keeps America free. It's the heartbeat of those who served, unseen yet unforgettable." He set his pen down. For the first time, he didn't feel like a politician preparing a speech. He felt like an American giving thanks. Veterans Day arrived. The White House lawn was covered with rows of chairs and flags swaying in the crisp morning wind. Veterans gathered from across the nation, some in wheelchairs, some walking proudly with medals that told stories of bravery and loss. Trump greeted Nora and her group personally. "You all clean up well?" he joked warmly. Nora chuckled. "Don't get used to it, sir." James straightened his old Marine jacket, and Helen helped an older veteran to his seat. Nearby, Henry and Martha Brooks stood quietly, clutching Daniel's framed drawing. Sunlight reflected gently off the glass, as though Daniel himself was shining through. Trump placed a comforting hand on Henry's shoulder. "Your son's message will live on today." As the band began playing the national anthem, every veteran stood, some leaning on canes, others on each other. Trump faced the flag, his hand over his heart. In that moment, he didn't see politics, he saw people. And silently, he promised, "I'll make sure the world remembers you." The ceremony began. Cameras rolled, but Trump's focus remained on the faces before him. When it was time, he stepped to the podium. The applause was soft but sincere. "Today," he began, "we honor not just service but sacrifice, the kind that doesn't end when the uniform comes off." He paused, glancing toward Nora's group. "I sat with veterans this week," he continued. "They reminded me that behind every medal is a story the world rarely hears." The crowd grew silent. He spoke of James, the Marine who carried courage home from Afghanistan, of Helen, who guided young soldiers when others lost hope, and of Nora, who carried a note for 35 years from a sailor who never made it home. He held up a copy of Daniel's drawing. "This," he said, "was drawn by a sailor named Daniel Brooks. He wrote, 'For those who dream of tomorrow.'" Martha Brooks gasped softly, tears welling in her eyes. "That tomorrow," Trump continued, "exists because of them and because of you." A hush fell across the crowd. The cameras zoomed in on the drawing, a young boy saluting the flag beneath a bright sky. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. "This drawing," Trump said, "reminds us that service is not about glory. It's about hope, about believing that what we do today builds a better tomorrow." He placed the framed sketch gently on the podium. "This will stay in the White House," he said, "not as a symbol of politics, but as a symbol of heart." Applause erupted. Veterans wiped tears. Even reporters paused, overwhelmed. In the front row, Nora clutched her medal. "He did it," she whispered. "He really told the world," James smiled. And they listened. Trump looked at the veterans section and saluted. "You've given me stories that will outlast any speech. You are the reason I believe in this country." When the national anthem played again, the crowd stood, not out of duty, but out of gratitude. For the first time in years, America stood united. Within hours, the speech went viral. Clips flooded social media. Newscasters called it Trump's most heartfelt address. But the impact went far beyond headlines. Schools began reading Daniel's story during assemblies. Veterans' families shared letters and photos online. "For those who dream of tomorrow" became a national phrase of hope. When Trump's staff told him the video had 10 million views in a day, he shook his head. "It's not about numbers," he said quietly. It's about hearts, Melania smiled. And you reached them. That night, Nora's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old shipmates called, some crying, some laughing. You made him real again, one said, Martha. Brooks received hundreds of letters from strangers thanking her for raising a son who inspired a nation. Nora watched the replay of the president's salute and whispered, Daniel, your tomorrow came. A week later, Nora received an unexpected phone call. Nora Whitfield? The voice said. Yes, Mr. President, she replied, surprised. Trump chuckled. You didn't think I'd forget you, did you? She laughed nervously. No, sir. I just didn't expect this. I wanted to tell you personally, Trump said, that Daniel's drawing now hangs in the Oval Office, right where I can see it every day. Nora was silent, tears filling her eyes. And one more thing, he continued. We're creating a scholarship for children of fallen sailors. It'll be called the Brooks Tomorrow Fund. Nora covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Sir, that's beyond words. Daniel's story reminded me, Trump said softly, that the future is built on remembrance. Now his dream will help others reach theirs. Weeks later, the fund was officially launched. At the press conference, Trump stood beside Nora and the Brooks family. This fund isn't just for one sailor, he said. It's for every man and woman who dream beyond their duty. Nora took the podium, her voice trembling but strong. Daniel once told me, even if we fall, others will rise. Today, you've proved him right. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Martha embraced her afterward. You kept my son alive? She whispered. Nora smiled. He never left. He just found a new way to shine. Months passed, but Daniel's story lived on. Schools named art contests after him. Veterans groups hosted Voices of Valor storytelling nights. Trump often referenced the scholarship, always crediting Nora. In Kansas, a new Veterans Community Center opened with a mural of Daniel's drawing. Beneath it read, Dreamers Build Nations. Henry and Martha held hands at the ribbon cutting. He finally came home, Martha whispered. Nora spent her days speaking to young cadets about service and hope. Every time, she ended her talk with the same words. Tomorrow belongs to those brave enough to believe in it, and every time, the room rose in applause. Not for her, but for the spirit behind her words. One morning, Nora received a small package from an old Navy friend. Inside was a yellowed letter, Daniel's handwriting. She opened it carefully. Nora, if you're reading this, I hope the sea has been kind. If not, remember, it wasn't the storm that scared me. It was the thought that I might never see what America becomes. Tell them I believed in it. Nora wept quietly, then called the White House. Within minutes, Trump was on the line. Mr. President, she said, her voice trembling. Daniel left one more message. Trump listened in silence. When she finished, he said softly, then it's time America heard it too. Weeks later, Trump addressed the nation from the Oval Office. This was written by a sailor who never made it home, he said, holding Daniel's letter. But his words did. He read the message aloud. When he finished, he looked directly into the camera. Let this remind us, America's strength doesn't lie in its power. It lies in its people, in those who believe, even when they don't see. Nora watched from home, tears streaming down her face. Melania touched Trump's arm afterward. That was beautiful, she whispered. Trump smiled softly. It wasn't mine. It was his. Years later, long after his presidency, the Brooks Tomorrow Fund had helped thousands of students. Daniel's drawing still hung in the Oval Office, untouched by time. Nora, now older, visited Daniel's grave one final time. She placed a replica of the medal beside his name. You did it, Daniel, she whispered. You gave tomorrow to so many. As she stood, a group of young cadets passed by. One stopped and saluted. Ma'am, he said shyly, are you the Nora Whitfield from the president's story? She smiled warmly. Yes, son. But remember, it was never my story. It was his. Watching through a live feed, Trump whispered to himself, and that's the America worth believing in. The flag nearby fluttered gently in the wind, the same one Daniel had drawn decades ago. And though the boy was gone, his dream, for those who dream of tomorrow, lived on forever.